My name is Cheria, and for a living, I turn workplaces into growth spaces. This podcast is a front row seat into my own personal and professional development as I talk with inspiring people about the growth that takes place at the intersection of work and life. Welcome to Grow There with Cheria. If you are listening to season 3, chances are you've also listened to some of season 1 or 2. And by now, you know that I am the kind of person who's always looking for a new challenge or a new experience that's going to grow me in some ways or expand my worldview in some way or just give me an experience that I don't know, is novel. And so I have a new one for you, and it comes from this woman named Vanessa Aldrich. I found her on TikTok, and she has this whole program where she calls it the Villain Challenge. And I won't share with you all the details of the challenge, but I'm going to explain to you what the thesis or the premise of this is. And essentially, she's wanting to help you tap into your creativity through the archetype of the villain. And the idea is that in every story arc, we highlight the hero, and usually the hero has some kind of sage or wise person or teacher that comes into their life and supports them in their journey. And we think that that teacher is largely responsible for the success of the hero. But on the contrary, she posits that it is the villain that is the most responsible for the success of the hero. And that is because the villain archetype forces the hero to mature. Until the hero confronts the villain or opposition, they never have to actually mature into their craft. And I thought that idea was so interesting. So I grabbed a couple of my friends together. In the month of October, we are facilitating our own villain challenge. If you are interested in this, please go to LinkedIn and DM me. I will happily share with you what we're doing. But the idea is that we're tapping into our inner villain the month of October, and we are pulling out all of the things that help us to be better creatives. When you listen to this episode of the podcast, you're going to understand why this feels so relevant, because today my guest is Evan Shapiro, and he is a true creative. Down to his DNA, he is a creative, and he has pivoted his life and his career in so many interesting ways, and I can't wait for you to hear from him. Since he created his map of media, Evan Shapiro has become known as the cartographer of the media universe. His maps, infographics, and ruminations are now widely quoted and used by businesses, executives, analysts, and colleges around the world. Using his very specific point of view, Shapiro charts media's future through his essays on his Media War and Peace newsletter and with his transformation agency, eShap. He also co-hosts the Media Odyssey podcast, which has quickly become an industry touchstone. Shapiro is also an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning producer of TV, films, and podcasts, including Portlandia, This Film Is Not Yet Rated, Please Like Me, Comedy Bang Bang, Brick City, and Harmon Quest. I first learned about Evan's genius on LinkedIn, and turns out he's good friends with the one and only Ross Martin, who you all know by now. And I am so excited to have him on the podcast. So without further ado, it's time to grow there with Evan Shapiro. Well, Evan, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining me on Grow There with Sharia. It's such a pleasure. I feel like this is, for me, it's a long time coming. For you, you had no idea who I am, but I've known who you are.
Well, thank you. I do know who you are, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Listen, you know why we're here, and I think For me, I just always like to reiterate that I'm so interested in growth stories and often in stories that are untold because I think a lot of times professionals get kind of cornered into telling the stories they always tell. But I'm really interested in how you have grown in a specific way, in particular, in a way where growth or I'm sorry, where work and life intersected. So the question is, can you tell me a story about a time in your life when you grew exponentially at the intersection of work and life, where something in your personal life deeply impacted your professional life or vice versa?
Yeah, I can. Um, so I moved to New York. I dropped out of college
Mm.
and I moved to New York to really write and direct, to create theater mostly. This is how long
Mm.
ago this was. I was very analog and I was very,
Love it.
very focused on theater. And so I moved here and I both looked for jobs in the professional theater and then wrote and at night directed stuff and in other arenas other than night in New York, directed stuff.
Yeah.
And pursued both kind of on parallel tracks. Actually, at first, I could not find a job in theater. I found a job in the restaurant business, waitering at Le Cité.
Mhm.
And the day before I was supposed to start there, I got a job as the company manager of a nonprofit modern dance company in Soho.
Wow.
And I didn't know that much about modern dance. I knew a little teeny tiny bit, but I was the company manager of a nonprofit dance company and the manager of a dance studio. So I got to manage the studio that both where the troupe rehearsed, but also it rented out for income as well. And so basically, I wound up running the whole business for a while, and it was a really immersive experience. I also got access to a rehearsal space for the theater projects I worked on for free, which was a
Oh, brilliant.
huge benefit. And I got to hang out with a bunch of dancers, which was super interesting. And I got booked the dance troupe on college campus. I learned a lot about the live entertainment business, and I kept working my way up through the live entertainment business while also working on theater projects. So while I worked there, I
Mm.
rehearsed in that theater and then did a production in a church basement.
Oh, man, where all great productions happen.
Exactly. And this is in the early 90s. Okay. And on the Lower East Side, which is a completely different place now than it was
Yeah.
then. It was a much more
Yeah. I
dangerous and I would
bet.
say argue interesting place back then, but certainly
Mm.
much more dangerous and much more cheap, to be honest with you.
Yes.
And I kept on
Yes,
those
definitely
parallel
that.
paths, directing, whether it was summer stock theater and keeping a professional career. I worked for the dance company, then I worked for a nonprofit giving organization. Then I worked for an advertising agency in live entertainment while I kept directing
Mhm.
either at night and on weekends
Mm.
or for a month at summer stock every summer. And these two
Wow.
things kept on parallel. Even as I got married and had a real adult life, I kept working
Yeah.
in commercial theater during the day and working on my own projects, touring projects. I actually bought a touring theater company with friends. Um,
Wow.
and then at one point, I became the head of the New York Shakespeare Festival marketing department. Became the first director of marketing of Shakespeare in the Park
Wow.
and the Public Theater downtown.
Wow. That's so cool.
And I was also still directing and writing stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
And I had a 6-month-old baby. My wife had one, and we were raising it together. We chose to raise it,
Yeah.
and we didn't find one on the street. We had a
Yeah. Good
6-month-old,
to know. Good to know.
and I was about to go away and direct a production of The Foreigner at a summer stock
Mm.
theater in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Pennsylvania, right? And then I was opening my own agency. So I had reached a place where,
Mm.
because of the work I had done at the public theater, the brand that we like helped create with Pentagram is still the brand today.
Wow.
We had launched
Wow.
Bring the
Impressive.
Noise, Bring the Funk on Broadway. We had done a lot of really cool stuff. We then were approached by the people who now produce Chicago and now produce Rent and
Mm.
now produce Hamilton to do a whole bunch of other stuff, including Rent and Chicago, which hadn't opened yet.
Wow.
This is how long ago this is.
Wow. Wow.
And so we're opening an agency, myself and a couple of partners, and it became very clear I could not go direct that play. And it became very clear with a 6-month household at home and
Yeah.
an agency that I was opening. And the
Yeah.
lessons I had learned as that company manager at that small nonprofit dance company, starting my own agency and really being the sole rainmaker at the agency. There was no way I could continue to write and direct as a track. There was no way I could
Yeah.
earn. By the way, I was choosing to lose a salary and go somewhere with my wife as a business partner too, who agreed for me to make
Mm.
no money while she also made no
Wow.
money while we went on this. And so I
Wow.
had to call one of my best friends in the whole world at the time and tell him just weeks in advance that I couldn't come to the theater and direct this production. And he was also a
Mm.
business partner in that touring theater company I talked about. I had to really screw
Wow.
this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had to give up my true, pure creative career, maybe
Damn.
forever.
Mm.
And what I decided was that night after I hung up breaking up with my business partner over this play, we didn't really break up, but so on and so
Yeah.
forth, that I was going to become so good at running this business and so good at the
Mm.
marketing end, because that's what the agency did. It's going to become
Yeah.
undeniable in it. I was going to take all of the creative genius I thought right?
Yeah.
Because it's a level of narcissism to think that you're going to write something that
Mm.
everyone's going to pay money to go see. There has to be a level
Mm.
of uncontrolled narcissism to that.
Sure.
Otherwise,
Sure.
no one
Yeah.
would ever start, right?
Yeah.
So it took
Yeah.
all
For
that
sure.
genius I thought I had, and I channeled it into the thing that we were doing. And we opened with 80% of the Broadway houses as clients when we opened. And we
Wow.
were cash flow
Wow.
positive day one. And we wound up
Wow.
building a really decent agency for ourselves. And I eventually sold that agency to those partners and went to work in TV.
Yeah.
And then I became the head of marketing of Core TV. And then I became the head of marketing of IFC. And then I became the head of IFC. And the day I got the call, 10 months after starting the job as head of marketing,
Mm.
the day I got the call from my boss's boss that I was going to be the head of IFC, the head of the channel, and in charge of
Yeah.
programming, in charge of green lighting,
Wow.
what went on the channel. So making content again. I
Yeah.
knew that the promise I made myself was that I'd become so deniable, they would let me make art again.
Mm. Wow.
And that paid off 10 months
Yeah.
after I dedicated myself to, 10 months after I became head of IFC, it paid off.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it was a twisty, turny way there, but the focus was I agreed with myself. Sorry, I didn't tell that story exactly the way I wanted to, but I agreed with myself that I would give up this thing and pour all my
Yeah.
energies into becoming a good business person and a great marketer so that I could get back to what I really wanted to do was make stuff. And then I got to make stuff in corporate America, right?
Mm.
Made
Mhm.
Portlandia, made this
Yeah.
film is not yet
Classic.
this film's not
This
yet
is
rated, Harmon Quest, a whole bunch of really cool shit. But as an
yeah.
executive producer, I'm the reason why Portlandia took place in Portland. So the reason it was called
Wow.
Portlandia, was my
Wow.
creative input. That's a kind of thumbprint of mine in the
Yeah.
creative world.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still, even working on that show, that's not my creative. So on
Mm.
my 50th birthday, I get shit canned from Comcast, from where I made
Mm.
a lot of great content, Harmon Quest, Shrink,
Yeah.
a bunch of other really great stuff. And I'm standing on the roof of my building where I live still today.
Mm.
And I believe my executive career is over. And I
Mm.
reminded myself why I moved to New York, which was to create.
Yeah.
And that day I became a creator. I agreed that that's what I was
Mm.
going to dedicate the rest of my career to. And cartographer, newsletter writer, LinkedIn writer,
Yeah.
podcaster, they are all kind of expressions of what I do. Even the consulting we do is still born out of the creator stuff that we make.
Yeah.
It's the only
Yeah.
reason we get the calls, right?
Yeah.
And so now
Yeah.
I'm the truest sense of what I came to New York to do in the
Mm.
90s, well over
Mm.
30 years ago.
That's
Um,
so powerful.
and it was that moment that I chose to kind of pursue creatordom in a different way
Yeah.
twice in my career. That's the intersection I'll give you.
Well, first of all, thank you for all that. I think it's such a great story and reminder that part of getting to that space that's true embodiment of who you are and who you want to be requires literal sacrifice and to let go of a path that might seem like the appropriate path, but when you know it's just not gonna actually lead you to your highest and best. It's gonna take you still down a creator's path, but is it gonna lead you to your highest and best creativity? That divorcing yourself from one idea of yourself to embrace another is such an incredible sacrifice. So I'm curious how you because I think there's a lot of people who listen who probably need to or want to or have the instinct that they need to let go of one path to go on another. How did you come to that? Or what advice would you
Well,
give to someone
in
in that?
each one of those cases, so if you look at, I mean, to get the job at the public, I had to take a major leap. Like I got that job
Mhm.
way earlier than probably I should have in the arc of my career because I actively
Yeah.
charged after it. And then that
Yeah.
hard pivot I left the public at the peak of my career. I got a lot of recognition for the work we did there. We won Tonys. I
Yeah.
could have stayed there for a very long time. But to
Yeah.
pivot hard into the agency business and work for everyone, that was a big lane change. And I had never
Yeah.
run a business before. I didn't have a college degree, let alone a business degree. And then the hard
Yeah.
pivot from there into television from theater, ostensibly, I had done a lot of other things
Mhm.
through the agency by that point, but still, this very hard pivot through the agency into television, and then the hard pivot from marketing to
Yeah.
programming. And then the
Yeah.
hard pivot from programming in traditional and running channels there into digital and then out on my own as a creator. Each one of those are big lane changes. And in each one of these cases, I think letting go is part of it.
Mhm.
But I think there are parts to each of us.
Mhm.
I have a marketing part, I have an executive part, I have a business head, right? I have a business part.
Yeah.
But at the core, there's the self. There's the
Mhm.
authentic, what I would call superpower. I traditionally call it a superpower. There is
Mhm.
no other human that is you,
Yeah.
and that is the thing. Now sell that. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a journey, right? And
Sure,
so
sure.
there are parts of you that become very clear very soon. I love to public speak. That became
Mhm.
clear in 5th grade, right? So
Yeah.
that was always gonna be a part that I could use, but that is also not, like, truly my authentic self. That's not the thing,
Mm.
right? So there are times I can use that part. There are times I can use the programming part. There are times I can use the
Yeah.
marketing part. There are times I can use the whatever. But
Yeah.
at the heart, I am a certain type of creator. I create. That
Yeah.
is what I do. For
Mm.
other people, it is I am a marketer. I am really
Mm.
good at, and then there are probably more specific things in there that describe your
Yeah.
superpower. It is a journey to finding that thing and understanding how to bottle it and sell it en masse or in small doses and everything in between.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I could not have been here if I didn't start that agency and sold it and then worked in television for a while. There's no way I could be here today with any credibility
Mm.
had I not worked inside Comcast. There's no way.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't have the credibility, frankly, I don't think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
or the frankly insight of how those minds work. And
Mm.
so, everything you have to see everything as a new part,
Yeah.
right? A new
Yeah.
chapter,
Definitely.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if the closer you get to defining that self, that authentic superpower that only you can have, that goes with you no matter where the
Mm.
client base is, whether it's one company or many, solving that part of it and knowing how to grow it, let it flourish, run it as a business of itself that you'll sell to individual
Yeah.
clients alone for periods or many clients at a time in other periods. That's the key.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I talked to so many people on this podcast, and all the stories are about growth, but I don't think anyone has pinpointed the way you just did that in my or at least the way I'm hearing it. Ultimately, growth happens in service of defining that superpower and then leveraging it in perpetuity.
They're very
And
they're talent like, I think talents are things that are almost impossible. The intangibles, they're almost impossible to teach, if not
yeah,
impossible to teach. That's what I actually
yeah, yeah.
the parts you add either make you able to hit the curveball. Like, one of the hardest things to do is hitting a round curveball with a round bat.
Mm, mhm.
There's probably a natural element of hit, but then you hone it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And, if you're a public speaker, well, then, there's that. If you're a writer, then there's that. Too
yeah.
often we ask people to correct. You want the truth of this?
Yes.
What I found over the course of this, when I got fired from Comcast, and
Mhm.
never really fit in corporate America, was that the things that made me not the greatest corporate citizen are the superpowers that people will pay me
Yeah,
most for.
yeah, yeah.
They are the same
Oh,
thing. My talents
yeah.
and my weaknesses are literally the same thing. I did a podcast with John Lane, and he did a
Mm,
personality test for me, read it out on the podcast, and on it, they pointed out my weaknesses, and then they turned around and pointed out my strength. I'm like, "They're the same. Now you hire me
yeah.
for all the things that people used to yell at
Yes.
me for
Yes.
internally." I also
Yes.
have honed it into a completely different thing, but I
Mhm.
have replaced the salaries and the income I used to get from corporate media with the same
Yeah.
money from
Yeah.
a different
Yeah.
source. So it is about discovering what your superpowers are and adding the parts necessary to make you both profitable and satisfied. Because the more
Mm,
satisfied you are, here's the trick, the more profitable you'll actually be. That shit people don't actually teach you in business.
yeah. I think that's so good, and I honestly, I feel like this episode is now feeling fully dedicated to me because I think one of the things that resonates so much is being a misfit in any structure. I've always felt that way. I've always felt like there was no doubt that I was talented, but I didn't quite fit the mold, which is ultimately why I ended up I'm doing what I'm doing now. And I could benefit a space for a period of time, but ultimately, my creative talents, my superpowers, they just kinda transcend the spaces I'm in,
Right, right.
And so what I've
Well,
known about
not
you.
necessarily though. I mean, they are
Yeah.
very useful for very certain things when those
Yes.
needs are had, and other times
Exactly.
there's no reason for you to be there, and there's no reason for you to be
Exactly.
annoyed by those folks who need you, frankly.
100%. It's like I always make the joke that I feel like Mary Poppins, like I come in when I'm supposed to be there, and as soon as the wind changes, it's like, "Okay, guys, it's
That's
time,"
pretty good.
Uh,
I'll
and I
I'll
think
get
that
you an
that's
umbrella
part
and a big bag.
exactly. Exactly, that's all I need, that's all I need. But I think that there's a certain listener who is a multi-potentialite, who is
Ooh,
trying to figure out how they fit into all these different environments, and they're beginning to home in on their superpowers, but they're still trying to navigate that, and I think it's a lifelong process. Even when I look
100%.
at the business I'm in right now, I launched this business 2.5 years ago. It looked different today than it looked when it launched.
Of
Like,
course.
it's changing while I'm changing and so I I look at your career path as honestly aspirational in the sense that every season you took the opportunity to get more clear about who you are and what you have to offer, making the next step more aligned? And that ultimately is what we're all doing, whether we're choosing like a linear path or not. It's still that. And if you can bring that to consciousness, you can be more valuable. And to your point, more satisfied with what you're doing. I think that's really brilliant.
Yeah, and there's actually and I have written about this on my Substack newsletter, Media War and Peace. It came to a point where I noticed that every summer I would shed a skin and go through a hard change,
Mm,
and it was usually timed to some major pivot in my career, but not always. Sometimes it was between pivots. But it was a shift internally
yeah.
or in my outlook that I knew I needed to have to get to a goal of change. by a certain period of
Yeah.
time. And it always
Mm.
came down to summer for some reason. And I think that's kind of psychological in my own head, to be honest with you. But if
Yeah.
you look at the business too, you've got the upfronts there. So the business also times
Yeah.
out that way as well.
Yeah.
So I then became a thing. It became almost a religious experience, or a faithful experience. I
Mhm.
do this every summer. I shed a skin.
Ah,
Then I
love
started
that.
teaching, and the process is really literally who, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Why am I doing, what am I doing? And why am I doing it? What am I doing?
Yeah.
Why am I doing it? And then I started 20 years ago, I started teaching at NYU,
Mm.
and I've been teaching, for over 20 years, kind of in many different places. And so, as my team now knows, and my course in college is actually a big backbone of my writing. So those slides,
Mm.
there's a lot of overlap
Yeah.
between my Substack newsletter, Media War and Peace, plug,
Yeah.
and my college course. So you'll see the things pop up in both places.
Love that.
So that's one key element of output, like cross pollinate as much as
Oh, yes.
as you possibly can. But my team will tell you, we now change our thesis. We shed our skin every
Mhm.
semester. So every 6 months, we shed our skin.
Mhm.
And that's where you come up with the user centric era. When you go on a forced walk like that around your own head,
Mhm.
and you give yourself a lot of fodder for that walk.
Yeah.
So we collect a lot of data, then we sit with it and we go on a walkabout mentally for a new
Mhm.
skin every 6 months religiously. And it really does. That's where the podcast grew out of. Like
Yes.
I've
Yes.
been asked to start a podcast many, 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 many times. But
Yeah.
it wasn't until we did one of these walkabouts about what's next and how do we scale without growing the staff and the overhead and all these other things that you
Right.
get away from people. How do we not spend a fortune on it and do something that
Yeah.
matters? And who should we work with? And that's where that all born from. So that process, you're exactly right. The journey never ends. And we're pretty sure of who we are and what our superpowers are at this point, but we
Mm.
change our relationship to them, as you said,
Yes.
as I just said, twice a year, every year, just to make
Yeah.
sure we're fresh and we're in touch with who we are and what the marketplace needs from us. What value can we add to the
Yeah.
marketplace too?
Yeah. I am obsessed with this shedding the skin. I'm gonna deep dive. I need to deep
Yeah.
dive into the
There's a
newsletter
really
because
good, so I don't remember there's one called Who Are We? But then there's another one that has a picture of my bar mitzvah picture. And that's the one that talks about this process and actually has a
perfect.
process. It has a process there.
I love a process and a
Well,
framework.
that's
So
the thing is
I
if you think about your career as a business, right? So you want to productize it to the point where you don't have to worry about it. You can just do it. That is a
yes.
part of it.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
creating these kind of habits give you no
Yes.
excuse to not just do it. It becomes a product that you can run. But then the other part of it, the advantage you get in the marketplace is having better intellectual property than everyone else, no matter whether
Mhm.
you are, what did you call them? Multi hyphenates, but not that.
Multi-potentialites or I call them
Multi-potentialites.
multi-potentialites.
There's that course that you and I are both on, but even if you just want to be a really well-paid executive out in the media world who
Yeah.
gets attention for being excellent at your job and better than everyone else, it's
Yeah.
still really helpful to have a thesis that's very up to date. It's very helpful
Yeah.
to talk about that thesis when you're on panels, and the fresher it
Yeah.
is, the more you reboot that
Yeah.
cache, the more cash you will actually
Yeah.
make. I just made that up right there on.
I love this so much. I feel like I'm in a clinic right now because I also think that I think as a business owner, there's this sometimes you feel like you need to be committed to the brand, which you do,
Dude, yes.
but the thesis is a different element, and it actually gives me so much more creative empowerment as I'm navigating and learning more. It gives me a new way to freshen to both maintain the brand whilst developing new theses. I'm
Well,
so
and
into this.
it helps you avoid things like making your business entirely about NFTs.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Or
exactly.
right now,
Exactly.
AI. And I'm not saying
Yeah,
AI won't be huge and you shouldn't really know about it. I just wrote a play about my relationship with AI on my Substack newsletter, Media War and Peace.
brilliant.
And it's a troubling actual conversation between me and ChatGPT. Very, very troubling. But
Okay, well, I definitely need to
if
check
you
that out.
anchor your entire brand to a specific trend in the marketplace, And that's very
Yeah.
easy to do as a multi-potentialist, is to like
Mhm,
go, because
mhm.
if you're in marketing, NFTs were the
Yeah.
thing for a minute, right?
Yeah.
And right now,
Yes.
AI is the thing, right? But if
Mhm.
everybody's talking about AI, how can you manage to stand out? I became known as
Yeah.
the fast whisperer, and I'm like, do never call me
Mm.
that in public ever, because I don't want to be tied to fast, because it's momentary. It is not a permanent
Yeah.
thing. It's a
Yeah.
causeway to something else.
Yes.
Strategist with fast and OTT and other elements, absolutely. And what do you do when people ask me? I'm like, well, this is my superpower. This is what we do. And it very much
Yeah.
depends on what you need and who
Mm.
you are
Yes.
and what your relationship is to the market in general. And if you're
Yeah.
known for one certain thing that applies to many, then you can go that direction.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. You know, I as we've talked through your one of you, because you have so many incredible stories of growth. You've been through so much life, as we all have, but I just you've been through a lot of life.
And
Um,
I've been through a lot. I mean,
I'm
wait, wait,
curious.
I think you just called me old. So,
No, I promise I
fuck
didn't. I
you.
just
Chill.
there's so much exactly. There's so much variety. It's
Yeah.
You don't know me, but if I were to tell you my story, there's a lot of variety to my story.
Right.
You are someone with a lot of variety to your story, and I'm always interested in people. Forgive me for lumping us in the same group,
No,
but
please.
for people like us who have so much variety, because it says something about our inclinations to be adventurers in life, and I think that's something that I value. I never really thought of myself as an adventurer, but when I look at what I've been
Pathway. Yeah.
willing to do, and I'm like, "Oh,
You've taken
I
a
guess I
dangerous,
am."
twisty journey. Yeah, I know.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
actually, the personality test I took called me a pathfinder, which
Oh,
takes,
I mean,
taking risks is, which is also the same thing as a map maker. So that's kind of
yes.
awesome.
It
And,
makes so much
and
sense.
that's the thing, is like sometimes the best opportunity is not the lane you're in. Or
Mhm, mhm.
sometimes you
Yeah,
want to be somebody who spreads themselves across disciplines. In either
yeah.
case, being able to understand your true superpower that is infinitely transferable, is
Mm.
defined by
Hmm.
you, not by the title,
Yes.
not the
Yes.
department,
Yes.
not the segment. Like, it's dangerous to
Yes.
get, because like scheduling used to be a thing. I mean, it is again now for
Mhm.
fast, but just for a minute, really.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we tie ourselves into doing this one thing, it's very dangerous and it's limiting. But if you're in media right now, mainstream traditional media, it's contracting. The jobs are
Mm.
there are a lot of jobs disappearing. And if you want to pivot,
Yeah.
now's the time to understand what you provide that's undeniable and singular and not
Yeah.
tied to the role, but tied to your talents and your superpower.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you were to take this experience that you shared today and take a nugget out of it that would be useful to business leaders, or this is kind of a pivot because my business is around organizational cultures and creating cultures where people are growing in lockstep with the business. And so I'm just curious, if you zoom out and think about culture, what is something that you've learned in this journey that would be useful to business leaders around how to cultivate a culture that is healthy, thriving, and winning?
I mean, the renewal story,
Mhm.
taking the temperature every 6 months on culture, whatever that metric is. So, most leaders are KPI driven, but the
Yeah.
satisfaction of their team is never usually measured accurately through surveys the way that it should,
Okay.
however you want to
Mhm.
measure it, right? And there is a direct correlation between satisfied staff and productivity, therefore profit. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I, I would argue create incentives the same way around staff satisfaction and productivity, not purely productivity. That's where you get like, you
Mhm.
have to use AI or you have to be in the office. Like those have
Yeah.
tos that are not, I understand both. But
Sure.
the
Yeah.
one size fits
Yeah.
all that, and I know if you have 100,000 employees, it's very hard to not have a one size fits all. I sympathize.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you're talking about true leadership and true management of true high level functioning teams around very complex organizational challenges,
Yeah. Yeah.
like transforming big media businesses or transforming small media business or transforming any business or building a startup business in this environment right now, um, it is about listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
60% or more of managers in America believe that they're giving concise, clear, and actionable feedback
Yes.
to their employees. Around
Right.
30% of employees believe that they're getting clear, concise, and actionable feedback from their managers. And I think
Mm.
12% of American employees report that they've ever been asked how they like to get feedback.
It's
12%.
wild.
And
It's wild.
and when you think about a workforce that is now 54% millennial and Gen Z,
Mhm.
and you then hear boomers and Gen Xers saying, well, why do we have to ask them how they want to get feedback? I should be able to provide them feedback the way that I like to provide feedback. No, no, no,
Yeah.
no. That's not
Yeah.
actually how it works. And not
Yeah.
because the rules have changed, but because that was always fucking stupid.
Yeah.
No two people, we just covered this. No two people are exactly the same. You're going to manage
Yeah.
everybody exactly the same way. How do you
Mm.
think that's going to turn
Yeah.
out? It's going to turn out with employees peeing in bottles, Amazon. And
Mm.
so, the consumer is always first. Well, taken to its
Yeah.
extreme, that results in drivers peeing in bottles. And so
Mm.
you cannot create a one size fits all manage, even if it's as hopeful as the customer always comes first, the customer at the center of everything.
Mm.
I love that. But
Sure.
anything taken to a zealous extreme turns
Absolutely.
dangerous.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
ask. The truth is listen. The truth is ask. The truth is, don't fake empathy. Build empathy
Mm.
into the business model, and it will help you produce at a higher level.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I'm so grateful for this conversation, and I wanna get into rapid fire with you to
Right.
close us out. Are you down for that?
Totally.
Okay. So, fill in the blank. Growth is
Organic.
Mm. What was the very first thing you realized you were good at as a child?
Making people laugh.
Beautiful. What was your very first job?
Shoveling horse shit at a horse farm.
Perfection. Um, who was the
You could
best
check that,
boss
by
you
the way,
ever
you could
had?
check that out on my LinkedIn. It says that. Go ahead.
Love it. Who's the best boss you ever had?
Who's the best boss I've ever had? George C. Wolfe, Public Theater.
Mm. What's something you're trying to learn right now?
How to give myself enough room to not do the first thing that comes into my head.
Listen, I don't know where this is coming from in you, but I feel like I also need that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Um,
look, I have lived a lot of life,
mhm,
and in recent times, it's very easy to let the things that are going on in the world and the things that happen to
mhm.
you, illness, disappointment,
Yeah.
get the better of you and make you angry all the time. It's very easy
Mm.
to do that.
Yeah.
It's very hard to not do that.
Yeah.
And so, I am trying to work on not doing that, not letting things bother me that aren't
Mm.
important, frankly.
Mhm. What's something you're trying to unlearn?
I'm trying to unlearn the worst parts of my bad habits. So there are elements of my
Mm.
weaknesses that are also strengths, but
Yeah.
taken to their nth degree, taken to their zealous end, they are bad. And so that's it.
Yeah. Tell me a book or a movie that changed your life.
The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Mm. Never heard of it.
It's a great book. Pulitzer Prize winner,
I
Michael Shambo.
wow, I better get with it. When growth feels good, how do you celebrate?
I don't. That's part of what I'm trying to work on. Like, I don't usually celebrate it. I've been trying to be better at that, but I literally go, okay, great, next, and I move on to the
Yeah,
next thing. There's a lot of that that's great. There's a lot of
yeah.
that as a manager in particular that's terrible.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
It's tempting
yeah.
to just say, great,
You
move the fuck on, let's go.
you know, you're not alone because you're just not alone. I asked this question, and I've got a lot of high performers on this
Yeah, right.
podcast, and I would say that 60% of
Yeah.
them answer they don't.
Not being,
Um,
not for nothing, but one of the most famous lines from Hamilton is, you strike me as someone who's never been
yeah,
satisfied. I
yeah,
look as a hiring manager, that's what I look for. By the way, which is
yeah.
why, and this is not a joke, but why I tend to hire a lot of women in high senior executive roles, because they tend to really be exacting
It's true.
of
It's
me
true.
and of their teams.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that is a key element.
Yeah. Listen, we're a force. When growth feels difficult or challenging, how do you take care of yourself?
I don't. Uh, that is the
These
again.
are just my accountability
Yeah,
questions
yeah,
that I
yeah. No,
ask towards the
that's
end here.
I do the same exact thing as when it feels good. Is that the wrong answer? That does
Yeah.
seem like the wrong answer. Okay, wait, maybe I shouldn't have said all that out loud. But that's exactly like, if you want to know,
Mhm.
people ask me a lot, how do you output so much
Mhm.
content?
Yeah.
The last two answers are the answer to that question.
Yeah.
It's sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels the same exact way to
Yeah.
me. Is that wrong?
Yeah. Listen, it's real. That's
It's
what it is.
information.
It's
You know what?
real.
It
Yeah.
actually, to be fair to me for a second, I treat both as information. Huh. Fascinating. Let's
Exactly.
do more of that.
Mhm.
Huh. Fascinating. Let's try to do less of that. And in recent times, when you look at how we've shifted our business, it's why we regroup every 6 months.
Yep.
We take the
Yeah.
data. This worked. This didn't. Let's do more of this. Let's do less of that. And so I don't get super excited or super disappointed. I look at the information, then I use it to make my next decision. That's how I
Yeah.
operate.
Yeah. I love that. 2 more questions. What would your 8-year-old self say about the life you're living now?
Wow. What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? What the fuck's that newsletter? What's a podcast? We talked about this a couple times now. Whether you want to change careers and have a job and health insurance and equity and all that kind of stuff, or you want to start something on your
Mhm.
own and have a multi possibility
Yeah. Mm.
possibilitist
All of yes, sure.
future, being able to travel with your superpowers, identifying them and being able to travel. And by the way, the things that make you happy, which change
Mm.
over time, by the way,
Mhm.
being able to
Mhm.
identify those
Yeah.
and take those with you in a kit bag anywhere you wanna go, that's really important. And
Yeah.
so you have
Yeah.
to go on that journey, and part of that is updating your knowledge base about yourself on a regular basis and shedding skin and waking up stupid and all
Yeah.
the other cliches I like to throw
Yeah.
out there.
Waking up stupid. These are I really gotta get into this newsletter. There's just too much fodder for me. Like, it's gonna be my personal professional development journey is to go through all your newsletters now.
Nice.
Last question is, when you grow all the way up and you leave this life, what is it that you hope to congratulate yourself on?
I know this is gonna sound really weird and super narcissistic, but a line at my funeral, I mean, the key is, like, I wanna help people. I wanna
Yeah.
leave, and that's kind of like, what's the data point? I don't know
Yeah.
what the data
Yeah.
point would be. Do you know what I mean? Like, but that's what would
Yeah.
the infographic be? My,
Mm.
grandfather, Jules, and this probably is the story I should have told. My grandfather, Jules, died when I was my right around the time I was talking about, sorry, and I just had just started my own agency, and I had a 6 month
Mhm.
ish daughter, um, and I think this is the daughter that was named after him. We'll go with that in the story.
Mhm.
But he ran a gas station most of his life in North Philly.
Mm.
Not only a college dropout, like, he had a high school degree, I think, but, like, barely. He grew up in the
Yeah.
depression. He had to go to work as a very young teenager and became a mechanic, and then ultimately ran a gas station. Always had a lot of dollar bills in his pocket, always had oil under his fingernails.
Mm.
And then even after he retired and sold his station, he worked as a mechanic. He at 80 some plus, he broke his jaw, shattered his jaw
Well,
replacing a tire and had screws coming out of his jaw in the middle of freezing winter. He went
wow.
back to work, right?
Wow.
But he was an auto mechanic, a short,
Yeah.
quiet, very quiet, at least when he was around family. At the gas station, I think he was a little louder and a little funnier. And his coworker said that. But I was asked to give the eulogy there
Mm.
at the funeral for him, and I'm like, "There'll be a couple of people there. There'll be the immediate family, which is, a couple dozen, and then some friends and
Yeah.
family." There was a line around the block,
Wow.
and
Wow.
afterwards, your grandfather lent me money when no one would do that. He gave me a job when no one was hiring people who looked like me. He came in the middle of the
Yeah.
night and picked me up when my car broke down. He gave me a loaner when I couldn't pay him for it. Give
Mm.
me free gas when I couldn't,
Yeah.
all these things. And
Yeah.
and it wouldn't stop. It wouldn't stop. It wouldn't stop. And so,
Wow.
the thing I want to be proud of is that I had an impact on people's lives in a positive way,
Yeah.
that I made some positive change in people's lives. That has always, and through stuff, hopefully, that I create, stuff that I offer to the world.
Mm. Yeah.
Which is why I write for free every day, even though no one's asking
Yeah.
me.
Listen, well, I'm now saying keep it coming because I've got a lot to catch up on. And there's just so much, lost it, earbud. There's just so much wisdom in this life that you have led and in the adventures you've allowed yourself to go on and in the ways that you've let it home in on your superpowers. And I'm so grateful you're sharing it with the world. And I don't think it's narcissistic for a cartographer to want a line outside of their funeral because to me that's information, that's numbers,
There you
that's
go.
data. So I think that makes all the sense in the world to me. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate you, Evan.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate you. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
So much fun. All right, y'all. Talk soon.